I've never been one to believe in superstitions or anything that escaped the cold logic of day-to-day life. Never. But that Saturday morning not only changed my life, it dismantled the reality I thought I knew. It was 7:30 in the morning. I had my crucial college calculus exam and desperately needed to be on campus in less than an hour. My focus was on the street, on the taxi. So when the elevator door opened on the ground floor, my head was filled with formulas, not omens, but my nose acted first. It was a smell that hit me like a gust of foul air, an unbearable mixture of fermentation, ammonia. It was nauseating, as if a sewer had burst and rotted for days. I thought, in a fit of disgust, what happened here? Only then did I look up. My building's lobby, the one I always saw as impeccable, cool, and well lit, was in ruins. The light seemed to have been sucked out by the filth. The white porcelain floor was unrecognizable, stained with a dark brown, viscous, and foul-smelling liquid spread everywhere like spilled paint. The leather armchairs that had always been there were ripped with the yellowish foam exposed, and one of them overturned with a broken leg. The glass sideboard was shattered, its fragments glittering in the grime on the floor. I froze in the middle of the lobby, a cold dread, not of fear, but of disorientation, crawled up my spine. That wasn't just dirt. It was the mark of a grotesque abandonment. This can't be my building. I looked frantically at the elevator panel. The 12th floor, my floor, was still lit. I had just come down from there. I forced myself to reason. It's fine. It was vandalism, extreme. Don't lose focus, the exam. With my heart pounding, I started walking, sidestepping the thickest pool, feeling the disgust rising in my throat. With every step, I could almost feel the squish of my sneakers sinking into that sickening liquid. The floor of my hall had been replaced by another, filthy and sticky. This was impossible. The panic was still silenced by my need, until I reached the concierge desk. My rush blinded me to the danger, and when I got to the concierge area, it kept getting stranger. The glass booth, a side door always closed. I needed it to get out. The main gate, only the doorman or the internal button opens it. I reached the armored door and knocked, expecting to find the doorman's familiar face reading his morning paper as usual. But silence. A silence that wasn't peace, it was absence. I looked through the glass, which was strangely dirty. The chair was empty. The counter was completely bare. There were no monitors, no intercom, no sign of life. The concierge area showed signs of years of abandonment, but I passed through here yesterday and everything was normal. I felt the terror, now a cold tingling in my hands. I forced the handle. Incredibly, it was unlocked. I slipped inside the tiny booth. The smell here was worse, so repugnant it almost made me throw up my coffee. It was acidic, feces, old sweat, and something metallic. Everything was messed up. Crumpled papers on the floor, something that looked like dried vomit on the side of the desk, and the screen of the gate release button was stained and cracked. I didn't think, I acted. I took my hand out of my pocket, and when I went to press the button, it didn't light up. It was completely dead. It was only then that I realized the outside gate door, which should be electronic, was just ajar. But before trying to force my way out, I heard him. I was on alert with adrenaline from the initial shock. It wasn't a sound from the street. It was someone whistling, a drawn-out, slow call, coming from the back of the building, the service area. A calm sound, but which, in that rotten place, sounded like a hunter's soundtrack. Cold sweat began to trickle down my back. The steps were slow, shuffling, as if whoever was walking was feeling the way, or, worse, sniffing me out. I huddled next to the booth door, the panic turning into pure adrenaline. The figure turned the corner of the hallway. It was him, the doorman, but not the one who used to be there every weekend. Only then did I notice the eyes. What's wrong with those eyes? The man approaching wore the building's uniform, but the fabric was unrecognizable under layers of grime that looked like grease. His pants were torn, his shoe untied, and his hair stuck to his forehead. A portrait of neglect, but that was the least of it. He stopped 10 feet from me in the middle of the filthy lobby. The whistling died in his throat. Then he raised his head and looked at me. The eyes. Forget everything you know. That man's eyes were a dense yellow, a yellow that seemed to have been extracted from a mineral. I'm not talking about the sclera, it was the irises. That didn't belong in a human body. It wasn't normal. It was a native yellow, natural to him, but profoundly wrong for life. They seemed to absorb the light. He didn't smile. He showed no anger. He just stared at me with the attitude of a predator evaluating prey. Then he took 2 slow steps and did something that made me freeze. He inhaled deeply, like a hunting dog picking up a scent, filling his lungs with the air around me as if he were savoring my smell. His yellow eyes narrowed. He let out his breath and, with a hoarse, guttural voice, broke the silence. "You don't live here." The sentence wasn't a question, it was a statement, a judgment. My mind didn't process a plan, it just activated the flight response. I didn't answer. I spun on my heel and, dodging the viscous pool with a desperate jump, ran through the booth, forced open the exit door that was ajar, and the second it opened with a creak, I was already outside, running into the street. My fear was now a physical panic, screaming in my veins. I needed people. I needed the street, the daylight, the normality. I managed to escape the building, but the street? What happened out here? I ran as if the very air of that filthy lobby was burning my lungs. The smell of rot and the guttural voice of the doorman echoed in my head. I went through the gate and sprinted down the street. My building is in a busy area of the city. On Saturdays, even early in the morning, traffic is already constant. There are always people walking their dogs or a line at the bakery. I expected to find life, normalcy, something that would prove the aberration was confined to the walls of my building. But the street was empty. There wasn't a single car parked, much less moving. The few closed stores were not closed with the usual metal gates, but with a type of dirty, rusty metal shutter, which seemed to seal them against the city or against the light. The silence was crushing, not the silence of the pre-dawn hours, but the silence of an extinct place. The sidewalk trees seemed drier, the gray color of the asphalt darker. It was as if the sound of the world had been removed. I stopped at the corner, panting, my hands resting on my knees. The terror escalated. It wasn't just my building, it was the entire city. I needed help. I needed to know the time. I needed to call someone, anyone, to confirm I was still in the real world. I ran to the bus stop. The stop was there, but the metal shelter was dented, and the advertisements had been torn off long ago. On the ground, huddled against the pole, was an elderly man. He was sitting, head bowed, his long, disheveled beard touching his chest. He wore strange clothes, a wool coat of indefinite color, too thick for the morning, and old fabric pants. His presence, at first, brought a childish relief. People, someone normal. I approached, trying to control my trembling. "Excuse me, sir, do you know what time it is?" I reached into my pocket to get my cell phone. I was absolutely sure, certain, that I had taken it off the charger with 100% battery before leaving. It was one of my habits. The cell phone was completely dead. Black, cold screen with no sign of life whatsoever. I tried to turn it on. I tried the power button. Nothing. It was a useless weight of glass and plastic. My voice failed as I said, "My phone died. I don't know the time." The man did not lift his head. His voice, however, was clear, monotonous, and came out like a direct warning to the ground. "You shouldn't be here." I felt a shiver that started at my feet and went up to the nape of my neck. I remembered the doorman's words. "You have to go all the way back. You are in the wrong place," he insisted. That man repeated the warning. And now, what is he hiding under his bowed head? I was paralyzed, not by fear, but by confirmation. The doorman, the lobby, the deserted street, the dead phone. And now, a stranger, a messenger with the same ominous information. They were forcing me out. "Who said that?" I whispered. "What do you mean, wrong place? What is this?" The elderly man, still with his head bowed, did not answer. He just continued the monotonous litany. Go back the way that brought you here." The pressure in my chest was unbearable. I was trapped in a horrible lucid dream, and the only way to wake up, apparently, was to follow their instruction. But before turning around, the curiosity or stupidity of someone on the verge of collapse spoke louder. I took a step back and looked more closely at him. Slowly, as if making a titanic effort, the man raised his head. And then I saw. They weren't the eyes of an elderly man. They were the eyes of a predator, identical to the doorman's. That same mineral yellow, which was nothing human. They were fixed on me, not with hatred, but with a silent, hungry expectation. The air seemed to grow heavier, and the nauseating smell of the lobby seemed to have followed me there, invading the street. He smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. It was a contraction of the lips. It was enough. I discarded the exam, college, my future. None of it mattered anymore. The only thing that mattered was to flee that place, flee those yellow eyes. I was no longer in my neighborhood. I was somewhere else, a place that didn't want me. I spun and ran back in the direction of my building, in search of the only portal I knew, the damned elevator. The escape back into the building is inevitable, but what about the doorman? Could I get past him? I ran down the deserted street, the sound of my soles hitting the asphalt being the only noise in a dead city. The image of the elderly man's yellow eyes overlapped that of the doorman, solidifying the certainty. I was in the wrong place, and the only way out was to return to the safety of my home. When I reached the entrance to the building, the iron gate was ajar. I pulled the gate with desperate force so that it slammed against the other gate. The doorman was there, in the middle of the filthy lobby. The noise drew his attention, but he didn't run. He didn't move. He just let out that slow, drawn-out whistle that I now recognized as his silent signature. "I knew you'd come back," he said, with that wicked smile that didn't reveal teeth, just a contortion of lips under the dirty beard. "The superintendent sent a message for the latecomers." I didn't hear him. I couldn't. His tone was one of someone stalling me, playing with their prey. I darted, entering the lobby, ignoring the viscous pool. The idea of getting into the elevator with that being was unbearable, so I changed course. The emergency stairs. I turned the handle of the steel stairwell door. It was unlocked. I entered the concrete cubicle, slamming the door behind me. The smell of rot was slightly less intense, but the darkness was suffocating. I climbed the 12 flights in a blind run, my heart feeling like a war drum trying to burst from my chest. At every landing, I hoped that at the next door, my floor plaque would be clean, that the light would be on, that the world would have corrected itself. I reached my floor, the 12th. I opened the emergency door and stopped in the corridor. No, it wasn't normal. The corridor was not lit as it should be. The ceiling lights flickered tiredly, casting long and sickly shadows. The carpet, which was gray, had been replaced by a cracked concrete floor, covered by the same brown, foul-smelling mud that was in the lobby. The walls were dirty, with handprints and indecipherable scribbles. It was the same environment of sudden decay, but now at the door of my home. Panic turned into total despair. They had contaminated my sanctuary. I ran to my apartment door. The door was there, the same color, the same height. I shoved the key into the lock, my hands trembling so much I could barely aim. I turned it. It didn't turn. I forced it again. I turned a key left, right. The key didn't work. It was my key from my keyring. But the lock wasn't mine. It was dented, old. I was locked out of my own home, in the middle of a corridor that looked like a horror movie set. I felt my throat go dry. I had nowhere to go. I sat on the cold, dirty floor, leaning against the useless door. Without a cell phone, without a way out, the panic consuming me like fire. I got lost. Suddenly, the sound of the door lock began to click. Was it being unlocked from the inside? But how? The sound echoed down the corridor. Startled, I quickly jumped up, getting my back against the wall directly across from the door. It opened slowly, as if to check and ensure there was no threat. From it emerged a huge figure, a tall, thin, and nearly bald man. And those eyes. He had those yellow eyes, the same mineral, inhuman yellow. He looked at me, and a wide, terrible smile spread across his face. He had no teeth. His gums were dark, receded, but he laughed, a dry, guttural sound, like the grinding of rusty gears. The path, it always brings you back to us. Fear locked up my spine. The doorman, the elderly man, now this one at my door. They were the same thing. He took a step out of my apartment, his apartment, and stopped. You want to go back, don't you? To your side, the clean side, the side where the battery works. He pointed at me, his hand with long, dirty fingernails. I could barely breathe. How do I go back? I managed to whisper. The toothless man smiled with his dark gums. The way back is the opposite path of what brought you here. Think, kid. Think about the last normal act you did. The last thing. My mind in panic spun. The taxi? No, I didn't call one. The exam? I didn't get there. The key? It didn't work. The doorman? Inhuman. The street? Empty. The last normal thing I did. The last thing that brought me to this place. The elevator. I got into the elevator on my 12th floor. I realized the exit and the portal. The man at the door was giving me the key. The exit wasn't through the street, it was through the elevator. I didn't wait for him to say anything else. With a sudden burst of energy, I leaped past him, sprinting down the dirty corridor, back toward the emergency stairs. The final run. The elevator will be the way back or an even worse trap. The toothless man could come out of my apartment, his apartment, at any moment. I sprinted down the corridor, opened the stairwell door on the 12th floor, and threw myself down towards the entrance hall. The smell of rot and abandonment was my soundtrack, and panic gave me brutal strength. I reached the ground floor and threw myself towards the steel elevator door. Before, it seemed cold and impersonal. Now it was the last chance. I pressed the ground floor button, and a muffled metallic noise, a grinding of gears, echoed from the bottom of the shaft. It didn't come from above, it came from inside the shaft, reverberating through the entrance lobby. And then, the sound. It came from behind me. The whistle. The doorman. He had waited for me. The sound of the metal grinding had caught his attention. The elevator was descending to get me, slowly, with the same agonizing slowness of his walk. I looked at the number, 7, 6, 5. With every floor that passed, the whistle got closer, louder, and reverberated even more through the lobby, behind me. Desperation made me press the ground floor button repeatedly. 3, 2, 1. I heard a muffled, hoarse, metallic scream coming from the bottom of the shaft, and the elevator door finally slid open, revealing the dirty, poorly lit cabin. I didn't think. I dove inside, and before the door had a chance to close, I frantically pressed the button for my floor, the 12th, to make it go up and take me out of that hellish ground floor. The door began to close, millimeter by millimeter. It was then that I saw him, the doorman. He was coming from the booth, with a speed that belied his shuffling appearance. His yellow eyes glowed in the gloom. He was too close. "The superintendent sent a message!" he screamed, his voice tearing the silence. "He said for you to stay, that it's safer to stay here." He tried to shove his hand through the door. I screamed, pulling myself back, and the steel door closed with a dry thud. The elevator finally began to ascend. I collapsed onto the dirty floor of the cabin, hugging my knees, cold sweat trickling down. I looked at the panel. The numbers went up, but seemed to drag into eternity. 3, 4, 5. The smell of rot seemed less intense in the cabin. The internal light didn't flicker as much. Maybe, I thought, maybe the change was already happening. I was retracing the path. 10, 11. The slow ascent was torture. What if the portal was just the elevator itself? What if, upon reaching the 12th, everything was even worse? 12. The elevator stopped. Silence. Absolute. The motor noise ceased. The door slid open. I stood up slowly. The corridor light hit me. It was white, strong, incandescent. There was no sickly gloom from before. There was no smell of rot or mud. The 12th floor corridor was clean, impeccable. The gray carpet was soft and vacuumed. The white walls were intact. The light fixtures shone without flickering. I was back. I stepped out of the elevator and looked back. The cabin that brought me was clean, the floor polished, the light white. I had entered the dirty elevator and exited into the clean one. Was the portal in the very act of retracing the path? I ran to my apartment. My hands were trembling, but this time, upon inserting the key into the lock, it fit perfectly. The key turned and unlocked with a familiar click. I went inside and slammed the door. I locked it twice. I leaned against it, closing my eyes. I was home. My living room, my sofa, the faint smell of my coffee. The cell phone! I took the useless plastic weight out of my pocket. The screen flashed and lit up, showing the battery level, 98%. I had left with 100%. I looked out the window. The street was there. Traffic was noisy. People were walking dogs. The city was alive. I fell to the living room floor, panting. I had returned. The way back, the opposite path of the one that took me there, had worked. The last normal act, getting into the elevator, was the portal back. But while I was there, desperately trying to regain logic, a detail haunted me. The calculus exam, the reason I had left home, had been completely forgotten. And more,
I remembered what the toothless man had said with the hoarse, guttural voice. Our path, it always brings you back to us. And then the doorman's whisper when I tried to flee. He said for you to stay, that it's safer to stay here. I came back, yes, but did I come back in time? I crawled to the entrance hall mirror. My face was pale, bathed in sweat, my eyes tired and red from panic. I turned around and looked at the door that separated me from the clean corridor and the normal street. I had returned to my world, but now I was a man who knew that just a few floors away, on the ground floor, another place existed, and that in this other place, beings with yellow eyes, hungry and mocking, awaited me. They knew my scent. They knew where I lived. And the toothless man said that their path always brought me back. The mystery was not solved. I just bought some time.
If you've also had the feeling that your place was wrong, swapped for an instant, click like to know you're still in our reality. Do you want to tell us your experience? Send us your story to the email in the description. We will maintain total secrecy of your identity. And you, in my place, would have gone back to the elevator or would have tried to find another way out on the deserted street. Leave your opinion and what you think these yellow-eyed beings are in the comments. Subscribe to the channel to continue the search for the explanation and unravel the unknown.